I'm here with Dr. Karl Campbell, the history professor, mainly North Carolina history, African American history at Appalachian State University. This is part of the video for the American Heritage Merit Badge. So, yeah, let's get into it. Dr. Campbell, many people know you as a historian and a professor, but you're also an Eagle Scout. How did the values you learned in scouting, like the Scout Law or the Eagle Project, shape the way you approach researching and telling the story of American history?
You know, before I was even old enough to be a Boy Scout, my father had been involved in the Scouts. So I grew up, even as a little kid, in the culture of Boy Scouts. Like when, I was the little kid who was coming along with the hikes and the trips, the jamborees. I was the little kid who went along. So in a lot of ways, I think I was actually acculturated into this world. The values. And for me, it was kind of this idea of hard work, honesty, trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, etc. But so that culture was like embedded in who I was as a person. Then when I became an Eagle Scout, I felt a special responsibility. As though now that I've achieved this, it's a responsibility that I have to take forward. That patriotism, that sense of belonging to the Boy Scouts of America, belonging to a culture, infused what I wanted to do with my life. And so when I thought, okay, so what am I going to do? I could be a teacher, and I started off being a high school teacher. I think, really, I'm still being a Boy Scout. I'm still like being the kid. When I was a kid and I saw what grown-ups were like, that's, I think, what I wanted to do. Now, the specifics, I don't even honestly remember what my Eagle Project was now, many, many decades later. I do remember, though, the value of camping with a bunch of guys and having their back and they're having your back. I remember the kind of values that I learned when I messed up and I owned it. So that's the stuff that I think I carry with me.
Yeah. And I mean, I made a video about my Eagle Scout project, and I'm very glad I did, because I'll remember loose things, but the super specifics are good. And I have a binder too that has all the photos.
I probably do in my attic somewhere. I can dig it
out. For scouts watching who might want to follow in your footsteps, what does the trail to becoming a professional historian look like? And what is the most rewarding part of uncovering North Carolina's lost stories?
I heard a quote, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it goes something like this. You decide what you're going to do in life, your profession, by finding what the world's greatest needs and your greatest desires are and how they go together. As a kid, I know this is going to sound corny, but when I became the senior patrol leader, I had to get up, and we had an old-fashioned troupe that sang a lot of songs. I'm not a great musician, but I would get up and lead these songs and lead the skits. And that's where I discovered that I was a ham, that I was outgoing. And so the trail from who you are now as a Boy Scout and is looking in the mirror, seeing what am I good at? What am I learning about myself? And then applying that to what the world needs and what your passion is. So for me, being extroverted, being good at being in front of people, and then loving history led me to want to be a teacher. So first I started being a high school teacher, and then I followed along. I don't think you can see the trail. It's like when you're on a hike. You kind of know you're headed that way for 10 miles, but you don't know what's coming up. So in a way, I think the point is look at yourself, look at what you're learning, figure out what the world needs, and then go step by step. So for me, being a teacher, in college, getting my certification, being a high school teacher, then realizing I wanted to teach older students, then going to graduate school, then finding what field I'm in. So it's a fascinating process. But you also ask, what's the most rewarding thing?
Yeah.
I was just talking to some educators the other day, future educators, and they asked that. And I said, now that I'm older, and I look back on my career, I love the history, but the most important thing are the students that I remember. It's mattering to people. It's hopefully inspiring somebody. Once in a while when I'm teaching, and I teach big classes sometimes, and I'll see some kids in the back that are just totally bored, not paying any attention to me at all. And so I'll decide, I'm going to get these kids to listen to me. And that's what I find most rewarding. I'll do every trick in the book until finally I get the blink. Oh, and yeah, you learned something in spite of yourself, man. Yeah, I got you. That's the most rewarding thing. Is like, yeah, I did something for that student and I got them. So.
I definitely remember, because I took a class last spring, and I remember you definitely are one of the most like interesting lecturers I've had. Where I'm paying attention like the whole time. Like I don't know. Like my brain wants to get distracted, and I can't. You know?
Thank you. I also was a theater minor, and I did that in part though because I wanted to be a good lecturer. Now there's a lot more to teaching than lecturing, but that's what I do, and I just think I don't know, to get up. I still get nervous. I mean, I've been doing this now for decades, but when I get up in front of a class almost every morning, there's a little, man, is this gonna be okay? Is it gonna be good? And that if I lose that, I'm gonna have to quit teaching.
It's fair. Okay, so the next section is going to move into actual history. So right here in Watauga County, the Civil War wasn't just North versus South, it was neighbor against neighbor.
Yeah.
As shown especially in the movie Cold Mountain, which I actually really love that movie.
Yeah.
Can you explain the war within the war and why the Confederate Home Guard became such a controversial force in the mountains?
Let me preface this by saying I think one of the keys to doing history is studying where you are. It's one thing to talk about the Civil War, but I always, wherever I am, I want to talk about there.
Yeah.
So here, we're in Boone, at Appalachian State University, of course. And so here, there were people that were connected to what we would call the market economy. People that were connected to railroads and capitalism and the slave system and the plantation system. They tended to be Confederates. But the people that lived in the hollers, that just lived off the land, what we sometimes call a household economy, those people, they had no interest in that. And in the movie Cold Mountain, it captures the tension of the kind of mountaineers that just wanted to live their lives and be left alone, and those people that wanted to defend slavery. So within Appalachia, there was a civil war within a civil war. People with different economic interests, different values, different cultures began to go in different directions. It became personal. It became, you always hear about Appalachia, like the feuds between families. A lot of that came from this period in the Civil War. And so I think, if you're asking about what happened here, it happened in Kentucky, it happened in Tennessee, it happened in Southern Ohio, where communities divided against each other. We always say brother versus brother, but it was family versus family, holler versus holler, valley versus valley. And it becomes really violent and really personal when the person that you're fighting isn't just some distant person, somebody from another country. That's somebody you know, and you know their family. And so I think that's part of why the Civil War in Appalachia was so intense.
Awesome. And there's actually a section, that's why I referenced Cold Mountain, of the Merit Badge where it says, find a movie that's historical, and that's the first one I talked about.
The other one is Glory. The movie Glory.
That one right there, yeah.
Glory is a great film. Cold Mountain is a great film. They're in different ways. Glory really captures the military experience of African Americans and great actors. I mean, Cold Mountain is more of a social history. But those are the two films that I think would be absolutely wonderful to watch.
Yeah. I definitely got to rewatch Cold Mountain sometime. That's definitely, I think also, as like a parent, that's definitely something I would show like my kid to like explain the Civil War in more detail, versus just like, documentaries that are just like the war.
It does raise a question that I think is interesting. And when you're in school, like if you're a Boy Scout and you're in school and you're listening to your teachers, you think about history isn't just the story of the battles. It's not just the story of the generals. It's also the story of the regular folks. The lived experience of regular people. And sometimes a film, even though it's somewhat fictional, can capture the truth of the social history. And that's what Cold Mountain does.
Yeah. Okay, so next, after the Civil War, North Carolina faced many issues, including the so-called Kirk-Holden War of 1870. Why was this such a defining moment for our state's heritage, and why did it ultimately lead to Governor Holden becoming the first U.S. governor to be impeached?
Yeah, it's a funny little statistic. He was the first governor in the entire United States to be impeached and removed from office. He was finally pardoned about 5 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, just recently, because it was unfair. After the Civil War, there was such a battle in the South between those people that wanted to support the changes that were coming, the end of slavery, economic changes, right, freedom, democracy, and those people that wanted to hold on to the past, you know, the kind of white supremacy and racism. Because the federal government pushed Reconstruction, and I don't know about the majority, but a lot of people in the South wanted these changes. What do you do when you're not in power? You're a white family and you don't want this. You want to regain the control you had. All around the world, there's one answer. You turn to terrorism. I'm a minority that can't win politically and democratically, and that's what the Ku Klux Klan was. So here in North Carolina, the Ku Klux Klan started becoming very violent. They attacked white and black politicians. They attacked families. They tried to drive people from the polls. It's our version of what we see in the Middle East with Hamas or, you know, those groups.
Yeah.
It was ours. So the governor here said, okay, we got to stop this. So Holden sent out people under this guy named Kirk to try to stop it. It didn't go very well. It was kind of heavy-handed, and a lot of the people, when they did come to power, then said, you know, this governor, he took away our civil liberties. He took away our rights to express ourselves. So it was kind of bogus. And that's why they impeached him, because they wanted to remove him, and they did it for power. But here in this state, we've never really overcome that, right? From slavery to the Ku Klux Klan to the civil rights movement, we're still fighting the battles about who's an American, where do people that are somewhat different fit in. I kind of learned in Boy Scouts that you respect everyone. You know, there's a certain patriotism that's involved in understanding and building a community. That's the challenge that came out of the Kirk-Holden War. I think that's kind of the challenge of American history.
Yeah. And that's always, I'm just so fascinated by it, because I never really heard about it until I looked it up the same semester I had your class, and then we talked about it. It's really fascinating.
And one other little tangent of that, Native Americans were caught up in the Civil War too, and down where in Robeson County, there was a lot of Native Americans that were not considered white and were not really allowed to participate, so they formed their own version of kind of terrorist group. And they followed, I won't go into all the details, but they actually fought like a little civil war within the Civil War, Native Americans against white. They actually were like Robin Hood. They were stealing from planters and giving the food to poor Native Americans. And so there's a lot of wonderful little stories about that struggle. It's still with us.
Interesting. So next, I'm visiting the Guilford Courthouse battlefield this summer as part of this project. It's a loss that historians often treat as a win. How did that specific battle in the Piedmont change the momentum of the entire Revolutionary War?
It's a good time to think about that, since it's the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. And a lot of us, I'm giving a lecture this summer. I'm going to be going all around the state, but especially this area in western North Carolina, to talk about North Carolina in the American Revolution. And I'm saying it's not just important history, but it's a sacred duty that we continue those values and fight for them today, you know, democracy and freedom and things like that. So as people were fighting, I mean, you think about this, there weren't professional soldiers. I mean, pretty much the people that were fighting at Guilford Courthouse, some of them were English that had come from England, some were Scottish, but most of them were loyalists that supported the crown versus North Carolinians that were rebels, Whigs, that wanted the American Revolution. So at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, which is right near the end of the war, Lord Cornwallis and the British, they win the day. At the end of the day, they take the field, the Americans retreat, and I just want to throw out Iran and Vietnam and Iraq and all these wars. Think of that when I tell this story. They won the military victory. The Americans retreated. And then they looked around and they said, here we are on a snowy day in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina. What have we won? We have lost all of these troops and all of this blood has been spilled and we have won a battle, but we're not winning the war. They're still out there in the woods. I mean, so that's the problem with so many wars. You can win the military battles. The British won almost every battle. but they didn't win the hearts and the minds of the people. They didn't strategically control. And so what did they do after that loss? The British, they won, but they were unsafe. So they went to Wilmington, and then they left and went to some place called Yorktown, where they were surrounded and lost. So war isn't just military battles. It's part of it, but it's also winning the hearts and the minds and the strategy of the system. So that's why it's such an interesting place to go.
Yeah. And then, so jumping a bit to more North Carolina, like politics, you wrote the definitive book on Senator Sam Ervin. He's a complex figure in our heritage, defending Jim Crow while also defending the Constitution during the Watergate scandal. How should we as citizens look back at leaders who have such complicated legacies?
Yeah, it's so complicated. So Senator Sam Ervin was a senator from North Carolina from 1954 to 1974. He starts being one of the brave senators that will stand up against Joe McCarthy and say, hey, this is wrong. You can't take away people's civil liberties in the communist scare. And then 20 years later, he's standing up against Richard Nixon. But he's also against civil rights. So he's for civil liberties. He's against civil rights. So I wanted to write a book. And, I was looking for something to do to get my dissertation and my PhD. And I decided I would study one person instead of studying a bunch of people. Because the complication of studying one person, the complexity of me and you and the people watching this video, we're all contradictions. So if I could study one guy who was really an interesting guy and figure him out, then maybe I could learn more and apply that to the rest. So I think we do that. We pick our little questions. Sam Ervin, in the end, I told here's the way I would explain him. One time, he was a guy down in Morganton, and he's turning 95 years old, and a reporter came up and said, you've seen a lot of changes in your life. You're 95 years old. And the guy said, yep, I've been against every damn one of them. In a lot of ways, I think people are against change, and we create ideologies and ideas to rationalize what we want. I think Sam Ervin he loved the South, and he was against change, and he could never quite wrap his mind all the way around the civil rights movement that was coming. What was the second part of your question?
How do we as citizens look back at leaders who have such complicated legacies? My example for that would be like Andrew Jackson.
Yeah, Andrew Jackson, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton. We all have our criteria that we use to evaluate people. But nobody's perfect. I mean, Thomas Jefferson owned slaves and wrote All Men Are Created Equal. He's a great president and a great American who knew that owning slaves was wrong. He said, in paraphrase, if there is a God, we're going to get punished for this. We're all complicated, so you can't look at people in the past and just judge them as like, he had a fault, she was wrong, I don't like them anymore. We have to accept that humanity is complicated. We're all contradictory. And then we kind of have to look at how people acted, how they worked it out. So I'm not a cancel culture kind of guy. Whether you're liberal or conservative, I think it gets kind of ridiculous when we just say, good, bad. I think people are messy and complicated, and we need to really study their context and what they end up doing in the end.
Yeah, my favorite president is James K. Polk.
K. Polk. Yeah.
Very interesting. Where he was born is right down the road from me in Charlotte. So I went to that site when I was like 5 for the first time.
And you keep mentioning something that I think fits this project of being a Boy Scout and being interested in history. You can read books and you can watch movies. You ought to go somewhere. When I was a Boy Scout, we went to the Gettysburg. We camped on the Gettysburg.
Oh, really?
And I remember, it's a great place to go. And there's a lot of places like that. But we literally camped and walked across Pickett's Charge and all. And that, when you're there, you can smell it, you can feel it, you can see it. It's more than just learning it. So I would urge people, man, just don't just read about history. Go walk it.
Awesome. And then the last question here. You've gone from being an Eagle Scout to having a PhD, and now you've spent years mentoring students here at App State. What is the most important lesson you hope for your students and Scouts to take away about their responsibility to carry American heritage forward into the future?
There's so many ways to answer that question, and I bet I would answer it differently in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But no matter how I answer it, it comes back to one theme, and that is what's the purpose of your life? You know, I mean, it sounds a little corny, but when you really stop and think, why are you getting a degree? Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you working? Sure, we want to make money. We want to be secure. We want to take care of our families. There's got to be something more than that. When it's all over at the end of the day, at the end of this trail that we're on, don't you want to be able to say, I made some difference, right? And whatever that is, whether it's building a company, whether it's helping students, in America, we have a belief in things. I think what makes America is a set of ideals, checks and balances, freedom of expression. We might disagree on how to achieve these things, but I think doubling down in the 250th anniversary that we're facing now and saying, I'm an American, I have a responsibility to understand it and to promote it. We can disagree, but we need to be part of it. So I think the most important thing for every American is be part of it. Think of what your role is in bigger than just the paycheck in the end of the day.
Awesome. And then is there anything else you want to add on camera?
You know, we're Boy Scouts, and a lot of the people listening to this will be Boy Scouts. It's a wonderful thing. But we all find our own ways, right? You know, there's other clubs, you know, not as good as Boy Scouts, but there's other clubs that are out there too. Just keep belonging to things. You know, in our world today, with all the screens and the divisiveness, I think it's important to belong. And, you know, Boy Scouts created an opportunity for a lot of us. So stick with it.
Awesome.
And thanks.
Let me get the handshake on camera.
You bet.
There we go.
There you go.
I love to edit those together.